Fans of the Horus Heresy, thank you very much for joining me for a how-to video. And here we have the final how-to in the series I'm doing looking at this Mark 1C Deimos pattern Rhino. As an if you've watched the other videos, I've made a series talking about different techniques and processes to use for assembling resin and preparing resin kits. And in this final video, I'm going to talk about interfacing resin and plastic components. So what do I mean by that? Well, it's about understanding that when you take a resin kit and then build it onto a plastic kit chassis, you're taking parts that are produced with rubber molds by hand through a process where the production tolerances are much lower than the steel molds that are used to produce these plastic kits, and the steel molds have far superior durability to the molds that these guys are made from, which are rubber polymer. So clearly what you can get is a mismatch between these parts and the plastic parts in terms of the size. So so I'm going to talk about three parts. We've got two sides and we've got the front hull plate. So firstly, just an observation, just some thoughts on Games Workshop plastic kits. I mean, this is the 40k Rhino. It's a pretty decent kit. It goes together well, and you can see that I've assembled the main structural elements of the hull. I've left out the bulkhead because I'm not doing interior detail, so it's not needed, and I've now got a spare part, so that's good. Sometimes with plastic kits though, and certain Games Workshop plastic kits this is true of, you don't necessarily get absolutely spot on tolerances, and you can see despite the fact I've put this together carefully, there are not even points of contact on either side of the hull. And I wouldn't expect, this is an older Games Workshop plastic kit. It's not as good as some of the new ones. So, or another high quality manufacturer. If you were to look at someone like, say, from military modelling, such as Tamiya or Hasegawa, who make very high quality precision plastic kits. New Games Workshop plastic. So particularly if you were to do a Night Titan, I think the quality of the kits has come on from these, but certainly ones of this age and also the Land Raider, there are some slight errors in the kits, and I'll give you an example when I do the Land Raider later of where there's an example of that. But yeah, so I guess the first thing is, perhaps before you start, if you were to put that together and think, oh, that's not even, well, bear in mind you're dealing with more potentially uneven components. So before you do anything to correct a wobble on a vehicle because of a slight error on the mold, it's probably best off doing these side parts first, and then once it's together, dealing with any misalignment then. Right, we'll start with the front plate though. So this is a front plate, and it slots into the front aperture on the hull. And it looks straightforward enough, but this was actually quite tricky to get to fit, and it just drops in like so. Now all the work I'm showing you here is complete. I'm not actually going to do any work on camera because this was actually quite slow, laborious, and there was a lot of moving back and forth between, say, a kettle with some hot water to do a little bit of heat bending there, and having to do lots of push fitting. So I've just kind of cut to the end, if you will. All right, so what did I have to do to get this to fit? So there are a couple of things. I mean, with this, I certainly wanted to get my lines true. So I wanted the top ridges of my front glacis plate to be flush with the upper hull plate. And you can see that is indeed where we've got to. However, to achieve that, I had to do quite a lot of work because this whole plate was actually slightly skewed, almost if you could rotate it a fraction of a degree this way. So it almost started life a little bit like that. That's very exaggerated, but that's what I had to correct. So how did I do that? Well, firstly I sanded this side down and preferentially taking material off the bottom to give a rotational movement this way. I mean, when you're doing something like that, you know, I was mindful of not encroaching onto this rivet detail. So, you know, I had to be careful not to take too much off. I also then sanded quite a lot of material off on the underside, and I slightly re-angled this lower edge, and that helped complete the rotation this way. And then the final thing I did after doing that, it was still slightly off up here. So what I then did was I then took a bit of material off this side of this edge to get it flush, and yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. You know, and you know, I mean, everyone's got their own particular desires in terms of how true they want to get a kit, and you know, but you know, this is supposed to be an Imperial vehicle, so I want it to look true and as square as I can do. If I was building this as an Orc vehicle, then a little bit of a wonky part would actually give it some quite useful character there. So yeah, you know, I think about what you want to achieve, because you know, before investing lots of time into getting a really true finish. So yeah, so I'm happy with that piece now. It fits properly, but it did require a fair bit of work to get it that way, and that is often going to be the case with resin parts, interfacing them to plastic ones. This Rhino is also, in some ways, is quite a tricky one for doing it, because it's got a relatively small hull size-wise, so you haven't got a lot of distance over which to hide irregularities. For example, when I did the Fell Blade tank, the plastic to resin interfacing in some ways was a bit easier because it's a much bigger vehicle, so you got more length in the vehicle to play with to hide little imperfections. It's still quite a difficult kit to build, but not in that particular respect compared to this one. Anyway, so let's move on to these side plates now. So here there's 4 plastic pins, and these are going to locate into these 4 resin receivers on the side. Like so. Now, what I've spent my time looking at here is the alignment of these armor ridges between the 2 parts. Now, and my aim is to get it to a point where they pretty well line up. Now, there's a gap there, and that will need filling once it's glued together. And then there's another gap here, likewise, that's going to need filling. But what I'm looking to do is, for the general lines, make sure that when that's connected there, that this lines up here as well. And if you can see that, then, you know, bear in mind when you glue this, it's all going to go together. I've got to that point. So in terms of doing it here, well, you know, you might do a little bit of trimming around the edges of these resin parts. But my other tip is I cut out these resin receivers to give myself a little bit more forward movement, because the whole thing was just a little bit too far back almost. So that just, you can see, I don't know if you can see it very well, but I've created a little bit of forward and back play there, and that just allows me to get the alignment. You know, so yeah, I mean, I suppose I could equally have cut the plastic pins down, but it's easier to cut the resin away. And now let's go over to the left-hand side of Rhino and look at that same piece. So exactly the same outcome I'm looking for here. Let's get these lined up. So that's the front. That's the rear. So that one actually probably lines up a little bit better than the other side. Again, I'm going to need to do some more milliput filling in places once this is on. Now, if I just... Oh, sorry, and yes, I did exactly the same thing here. I cut out these resin receivers to give myself forward and backward movement, and there was exactly the same, I encountered exactly the same issue on this side as the other, in that the whole thing was sat a bit too far back to start with like that, and I just needed to open up those receivers a little bit to allow it to move forward and align properly. And once I stick this together, this will look, it'll be as well aligned as you can get it, I would say. But yeah, so if you wanted to get a really sharp, neat finish, just things to look for and ideas around how to give yourself a bit of movement with the part, and also hide how you do that as well, because you don't want it to show in the final model. The less filling and cutting and sanding you do of the actual detail, the better. The more you can achieve the final location by doing stuff behind the scenes, the better. Let me just drop that whole plate in. So there we go, and clearly I won't get the final location on these until I actually glue them. I'll see if I can just get it about right. Yeah, so, but this is very nearly built now. It's ready. It's pretty much ready for final assembly. One other piece I'm going to show you. So here we have the Dozer Blade, and this is designed to stick on the front here. Now there's no guide holes or anything, so it's just sort of going to slap on there, so you can measure that out, or there's a few techniques you could use to align that, but that will go there. Now, thinking about strength of the final model, a flat super glue attachment isn't particularly strong, and that could very easily snap. Even using an epoxy adhesive I don't think is going to be strong enough there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a block of milliput into behind this bulkhead. I'm going to put a block of milliput in, and then I will be able to put a pair of pins into this, and then I'll be able to drill that in, and that will give me a really solid attachment point that won't then break in the future. I'll pin through into that, obviously. So yeah, another thing to watch with resin parts, because sometimes they're not, the attachment points are not necessarily as structurally sound as the original kit component designs was. So yeah, no. So there you go. There's a few thoughts and observations around interfacing your resin to plastic components. Some kits are easier to do this on than others. Vehicles like this, which are very rigid and very angular, are definitely the trickier type to do. Putting resin components onto, say, a plastic night body, you're probably going to have a bit more play because of how rounded it is and the fact it's a walker with limbs. That will probably give you that'll be an easier interface to do. So yeah, it depends on the model as well. But yeah. So yeah, I hope you found that an interesting series. And I originally started this for Egologis, I believe. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed watching these. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. I'll speak to you next time, and goodbye.